Welcome. I don't know if any of you joined me earlier, but I did have a session with Abby Turner and we talked about our respective books. And in this one, I am going to walk you through one of the recipes in my book. It is a candied jalapeno bacon cornbread. And if you aren't familiar with my book, it is easy one bowl baking. Everything in it can be made in one bowl. I do have some little things that I do to kind of to trim and cut corners without cutting quality or flavor, and still making a really great recipe, but we're just doing it the easy way. So I am going to start. I already kind of jumped ahead just a little bit to give us some time. I have put my bacon in the oven and it has been baking at 425 for 15 minutes. So I think it is about ready. So I'm going to get that out. Yeah. So this is the skillet that we're going to be cooking our cornbread in. And what I did was I simply lined it with a little bit of aluminum foil. So I'm going to bring this over here and I'm going to put my skillet back in the oven, which is, if you're a Southerner, you know this trick already, I'm sure, but the skillet goes in the oven and it stays warm so that when our batter goes into it, it immediately crisps up and you're going to get those yummy crumbly edges like a hush puppy. So same thing. Good. And in the chat, we've got some information on where you can buy the book. All right, so I'm going to let this cool down just a little bit before I chop it, but I'm going to show you guys what I'm working with here. So what I did was I laid down my strips of bacon and then I took jalapeno slices, and I really love this brand right here. It's Mazzetta's, and this is a medium heat. They have tamed, so you get that yummy jalapeno flavor without a lot of heat. Some people don't like spicy jalapenos. You can't handle it. This is a really great alternative so that you can get all that great flavor without too much heat. So I definitely recommend finding some of those. So I'm gonna let this cool down just a little bit. We don't want it to cool too much because then it will stick to the aluminum foil, but we're gonna let it cool just a little bit so I can handle it. I'm gonna pop some gloves on because it is sticky, but I laid it down, put the jalapenos on top, sprinkled a 1/4 cup of brown sugar over the top and a little bit of cayenne. I have an amount, it's a teaspoon, really however much you like, however much heat you feel like handling at the time. So I'm going to jump into making our cornbread batter. So I've got 1 stick of butter here. It's unsalted. I always use unsalted so that we can control the salt in there. And yes, if you've got questions, throw them in the chat. I'm on my phone, so I can kind of see them pop up, but hopefully I'll get some help on checking those out. So I'm going to put this in the microwave just long enough to melt it. While my cornbread is in the oven, I'm going to go over some tips and things that'll help you have a kitchen that is set up for easy baking success. I tend to stand right here while I am decorating all of my cakes. So this drawer in front of me is filled with all of my cake supplies that I use regularly. So all of my spatulas and things. So that's, just organize your kitchen for where you work. This drawer is filled with all of my other spatulas and dishers, cup measures, measuring spoons. All of that is right here. So it is very handy for me and accessible. So I'm not walking all over the kitchen unless I need the microwave. All right, so we've got our butter and it is melted. And then we need 1 cup of flour. When you're working with flour, when you're working with any ingredients, really, you can either do it by volume or do it by weight. I learned everything by volume. So that means that I scoop it out and I have a cup measure. by weight is going to give you a more accurate representation of how much you're putting in there. When I had my restaurant and we made biscuits, the recipe was done by volume like this. And we realized that among the four of us that would make the biscuits, some of us were packing that flour in there and some of us were doing it much more gently. And the difference of how much flour was going into the product was varying greatly, especially when you're making a large scale. Like if it's just a half a cup, you may be off a little bit, but this was 12 cups worth of flour. And so we switched over to weight because it made a much better product. So when you're working with flour, if you haven't been in your flour for a bit, I like to do this where I just take my scoop in and I just kind of run it through the flour and just aerate it a little bit and then get in there, get our scoop. And then you want a nice level scoop. So 1 cup of flour. We also need 1 cup of cornmeal. Cornmeal is a little less finicky. It's not going to be quite as bad as the all-purpose flour. And then this is one of those things that is a little controversial, but there is sugar in my cornbread. I mean, obviously the bacon is candied, so we've already got a little bit of sugar that we're messing with, but I do have actual sugar. This is a tip that I will plan on talking about later, but pinch bowls. I love pinch bowls to keep all of my small ingredients in. So earlier when I set out my stuff that I needed, I went ahead and measured out my sugar, my baking powder, my baking soda, and my salt. And I have it right here because I find that, if you forget the flour, like you look down and you can tell, is there or isn't there flour in this bowl? But with the salt, you may not realize that you've missed the salt or not. You're kind of looking through it going, is there salt in here? I can't remember. Did I have that already? If you put everything in this bowl to begin with, it's either in the bowl or it's not in the bowl. So now it's in the bowl. Just give that a little bit of a stir. We have 2 eggs. And then 1.5 cups of buttermilk. Easy peasy recipe. And what's great about this is it's a pretty basic recipe that if you didn't want to do the bacon and the jalapeno, you could swap this out and do other really fun stuff with it. You could make it a little bit sweeter if that's something that you like. You could add some spices to it right now. You could just do the bacon and not do the jalapeno. So it's a good base. I have in the past made a brown butter cornbread. So you would brown your butter, and then after it's browned, you would want to measure it so that you end up with the same amount. You still want 8 tablespoons of butter that is browned. So you would probably brown closer to 10 or 12 tablespoons of butter, just so that when it reduces, you still have it. So I'm just going to slide that over. I'm going to pull out this bacon and these jalapenos, and I'm going to start cutting it up. You want to get your bacon as crispy as you like it. However, it says to bake it for 15 minutes. If you need to bake longer, if you need shorter, just watch it. And it will stick a little bit, but my edges are kind of hanging on right there. Nice and crispy. You can hear it crunching away. And right into the cornbread it goes. Got a little bacon on the counter. And you can see that just from that little bit of time sitting there, we've started to have a reaction between our baking soda and our buttermilk, which is what's going to give us the lift. So that's pretty awesome. All right. I could scrape it into the pan with my whisk. I like a spatula. Just going to bring this over. And you can see it is smoking. This thing is hot. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it when it hits. You hear that? Yes. That's what I'm talking about. Love that sizzle. So we're going to get some awesome crispy edges in there. Okay. And into the oven it goes. We're still on 425 degrees. And I'm going to put my timer on for 20 minutes. And that is going to bake away. I'm going to check it at 15. Got a new oven. And it bakes things a little bit faster, a little bit different than it has previously. So while that's going, getting your kitchen set up to be successful with baking is really not terribly hard. You need a couple of things, but you don't need a ton of stuff. Like I said, the first thing is going to be setting your kitchen up where you use the items. So I tend to do my work over here, but I do my cooking, obviously, back over by my stove. And I have all of my spices set up in this drawer. Love it. It's out of sight, but it's within reach. So that's really important. I like to, sometimes I use a lot of things, but I don't necessarily dirty them. So I have 2 sets of measuring spoons, and I will get both sets out. I will use one for my dry ingredients and one for my wet ingredients. So if I'm adding vanilla, but then I need to measure salt, if you put the vanilla in and then you try to measure the salt's going to stick and it gets all gross. But if you use the vanilla over here and then you just rinse it out, if you use nothing but dry ingredients, like you can see, I haven't washed these. There's still a little bit of residue because this is my dry set. And a tiny bit of leftover residual baking soda isn't going to hurt anything. Now, if you are working with like an allergen, obviously that's a whole different situation. So you wouldn't want to use reuse a utensil like that with something that somebody could get sick. One of the things that I really love in baking are my dishers. I get a lot of my stuff at the commercial kitchen supply company, different places. You can get stuff, Eggshells has things, Aimco, Krebs Brothers in North Little Rock. I mean, anywhere in the country you can get these different things, but locally that's where I tend to go. The reason I love my dishers so much is because they're a uniform amount and I know what each one is. So this is a 1/4 cup. This is 2 tablespoons. This one is a 1/2 cup. And I love them for a lot of different things. I use a lot of sour cream in my cakes, and this 1/2 cup of sour cream, level it off, and it comes right out. And then it just needs to be rinsed, as opposed to trying to measure it in a measuring cup, and then you have to scrape it back out. I can do all of that with just one tool. And then I also use this same disher to portion out my cake batter in my cakes so that everything is uniform. The 1/4 cup is great for cupcakes or muffins And a lot of my recipes come out to a specific amount, like at 12 or 24. And that way, you know that you're consistent and they're going to bake more consistently, as opposed to like scooping and kind of guessing and eyeballing it. This is going to give you a more uniform product. And then the purple disher is for cookies. So most of my cookies are this size, and I like to scoop it out while the dough is soft, freeze them, and then I can bake them anytime that I want. So these are important to have, and I love that they come in so many different sizes. There are actually a ton more. You can get a full cup. I believe this one's a third of a cup, and I have tons of them. I use them regularly. They're going to make your life so much easier, and it's going to make your product so much better because it is uniform. Another thing that I really love are these nesting bowls. This is what I use for all of my baking. That cute little pink bowl that I used earlier, that one's just the one I use for show. I actually bake in all of these bowls. The smallest is really great for just collecting all of your ingredients in. So I have dinner prepped already. So I've got a bunch of onions and bell peppers prepped in one of these bowls, ready to go. Goes right into the dish when I am ready to bake. It's important to have a variety of sizes. I really like this size. Should know what it is. It is 8 quarts. So this 8-quart bowl is great for proofing bread. Most of my bread recipes, I have an entire chapter. Chapter 6 is yeasted doughs, and they need to double in size. And so this is going to give you enough room to get that dough to rise where it needs to. Whereas this one is a good size for making cakes, brownies, things like that. And like I said, the smaller ones are great. Excuse me. The smaller ones are good for just keeping your ingredients in and then just rinse them out. A lot of times I think that, it's this idea of, oh, I've dirtied all of this stuff, but sometimes it just had a little flour in it. It's not dirty. It just needs to be rinsed, and it helps you get all of your ingredients laid out. So if you're starting to bake or you really want to take it a little more seriously, a nice set of these bowls, and they're not expensive. These range from the big ones are, I think, somewhere around like $5 or $6. The smaller ones, like $2 or $3. Like, these are not expensive things to invest in. Same with the dishers. They're a couple of dollars. And then having your pinch bowls, your nesting pinch bowls are wonderful. Another thing that you can do that will help you is if you're going to pre-measure out some of your ingredients. I didn't do it for this one, but I measure out my 1.5 cups of buttermilk. I could have gone ahead and cracked my eggs directly in here. If there were oil in this recipe, go ahead and add your oil as well. And then everything is in one little dish, and then we wash the one thing. You don't have to wash 20 things or have all these multiple scoops. You just wash the one. I probably have I have 3 different flour containers because I still do wedding cakes. So I do a lot of bulk baking. So bulk wedding cakes. So honestly, my flour container is not this cute little one. This is just for when I have to do cooking segments. My flour container holds 50 pounds of flour. So it's pretty big. And then I do have one in the kitchen that is smaller. It's down here and it holds like 20 pounds of flour. But one of the things that I do is all of my flour containers have a measuring cup that live in them. My flour container has one that lives in it. My sugar container has one that lives in it. And based on what my recipes tend to use the most is what stays with it. And since I do everything in bulk, the majority of them have 1 cup measures in them. But we do keep a sugar container that we use just when we make sweet tea. So it has 1/3 of a cup in it because that's what we use. And it just lives there and it always stays there. So I never have to clean it. If that would probably be the thing, is to keep from having to like constantly wash dishes, is invest in extra measuring cups and just leave them in the container where they live and always use them over and over so that you don't have to wash them. Kind of a silly little thing, but it's what works for me. Okay. We've got 11 minutes. It's looking good, guys. It's looking good. So it's got a nice crunchy edge on it. The top has started to puff up and it smells delicious. Going back into my book and just running through, kind of looking at chapter 1. Gosh, so I made a little something I'll tell you guys about at the end. But a hand mixer, I actually had not had a hand mixer until I wrote this book because I am so obsessed with my stand mixers. I love my stand mixer and I will use it for everything just because for me, it's very handy to like pull it out, drop ingredients in, and it's mixing while I'm going and I'm collecting my ingredients. I think it is the best, but I was informed by my publisher that not everyone has a stand mixer. And so everything in this book was written to be used with a hand mixer. So I bought a hand mixer just so that I could write this book. So I do think it is important to have one of those. Another thing that is important, as I mentioned earlier, talking about weighing out your ingredients, and that is to have a digital scale. They're really easy to use. I know when I first started baking, I didn't do anything by weight and it just seemed really intimidating. I didn't understand any of it. It's very simple. There is a whole thing in my book that talks about it. You can get these anywhere $10, $20, depending on like what model that you're getting. I will say I recommend, mine does this little thing with the magnets and you can slide the front out so that you can, if you put a big bowl on it and you can't see underneath, you can pull the extension out so that you can still read the screen. So these are very handy. Again, if you're starting out or if you're thinking about getting into baking a little bit more, this is going to take you up a notch and just make all of your baking just a little bit better. As far as other baked pans that you might need, obviously cake pans, 8 or a 9 inch is pretty standard. I would have a couple of those, 2 or 3. A bundt pan is good. There are some gorgeous bundt pans on the market now that have all of these intricate designs. I still struggle getting some of my cakes out of those. I have times where they just don't want to come out. The basic bundt pans really are the best to start with if you are trying a bundt pan. Personally, I just think that that's a good thing to start with. Your loaf pans. Yeah, I got some time. All right, so a little loaf pan right here, and this is a loud drawer. And a square pan. Parchment paper is your friend. Parchment paper is your friend. It is going to make life easier. It's going to make cleanup easier. And obviously, lining a round cake pan is super easy to do. You know what to do. I will just trace the pan, pop the circle in. For a loaf pan, what you want to do is get a length of your pan. I'm just going to rip it because this doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. So we have the length. And then you just set it in there as a sling. So it'll go front to back and it comes up over the sides. So each end does not have anything covering it, but when it's time to get your baked good out, just a butter knife or a spatula, run it along both of those edges, and then you will lift and it comes right out. Super simple, super easy. If you take nothing from this little session, take that. This one, this is a 10-inch, my 8 inches in the other room, but I turned it upside down. And then I'm gonna fold in until the center of it fits the square of the bottom of the pan. We've got all of our corners. And now, so it's all folded up like that. I'm just gonna make one cut here. One cut here. And yeah, so 4 little cuts. Pop my pan back over and set that down. And now the corners will fold up on themselves. And you've got this perfect little square sling that is right inside. So then fill it with whatever batter you have. Sometimes I will spray before I put the paper in, just kind of helps it hold it in place. So you put it in there. And then when it's time to get your item out, same thing. We're just gonna lift, pull it right out and set your baked good to the side. This might need a rinse from any of the spray that you did, but it doesn't need to be scrubbed because you didn't bake any brownie bits into the corners. And then also you don't have to worry about if you do the thing that I sometimes do when I bake brownies. I want the center to be kind of soft, maybe a little gooey, but then they're hard to get out. But this way, parchment, the whole thing came out in one piece, which is exciting. Okay, my cornbread is smelling really good. And I'm at about 15 minutes now, 16. All right. The top is nice and golden, but I'm touching it and it's springing back. So I know that it is not done yet. Wonder if you guys can see that. So like, it's kind of, I can feel it under there. It's like a little lava. So it is not quite done. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave it in for its 4 minutes and it should be good. Another tool that I really, really like is, it's so simple and it seems kind of silly, but it's my pizza cutter. I love a pizza cutter. It does exactly what a knife does, but it's gonna do it faster and it's gonna do it easier. So I use it all the time when I'm making cakes and I cut fondant. You get nice little even fondant strips. But also when I am working with some of my yeasted doughs. So like when you're making a cinnamon roll, if you need to cut any of that dough before, use that. And it's you will be shocked. I know it's just a pizza cutter and that seems really silly, but it's a tool that is wonderful. In my book, I talk about a variety of different ingredients, including flours, sugars, when to pack those, when not to pack them, how to replace them. Ooh, I've got a question. Let's see what that says. Over to the chat. Okay. Okay. So for gluten-free adaptations, for flours and stuff. Bob's Red Mill has a flour that is a 1-for-1. So I do talk about that right there. So I really do like that 1-to-1 flour. I have used it in the past for wedding cakes and people have not noticed. You can't really tell. I also like to use almond meal or almond flour quite a bit, just because it's already sweet, it's nutty, it's going to give you really good flavor, but it will not work as a 1-for-1 on like an all-purpose flour. So if there's a recipe that calls for all-purpose and you want to substitute, I would do the Bob's Red Mill, and not like an almond flour. If you have a 1-for-1 flour and you maybe don't like the flavor of it, you could substitute in some almond meal, but I wouldn't go 100% replacement because it's going to end up a gummier texture because it's a bigger, it's not a grain, but it's a bigger piece. So it's not going to replace the same and give you the same texture. It will give you a different flavor and texture. With that said, my book does have these labels up here. So this one is the Peppermint Meltaway cookies, and it is nut-free. So we do have tags on all of them that let you know if it is nut-free, gluten-free, or vegan. We've got some dairy-free as well. So I tried to go through and have a variety. I mean, you're not going to end up with 20 recipes that are going to fit each different need, but it's going to give you some different options. So there is a honey walnut muffin that is gluten-free. Actually, I think my index is going to tell me all of them. Gluten-free, yes. So the 3 gluten-free that are in here are, I have a blood orange ricotta cake that I absolutely adore. We're going to be into blood orange season in like January. So I definitely try that out when those are in season. If they're not in season, it's delicious with lemon as well, but the blood orange is so good. There is a hash brown quiche recipe that I really love. And then the honey walnut muffin recipe is also gluten-free. Delicious. I think we're good. Okay. Okay, guys, so there is the cornbread, and this is going to be good with just about anything, you know, make some pot of beans. Can also make some soup. It's starting to get soup weather, which is amazing. Use my right hand. I'm a little stronger on the right hand. This is obviously heavy with the cast iron. So there we have our finished. I don't know if you can see around the edges, but it is crunchy. Trying to get it out of here in one piece. All that steam. Okay. All right. It is still obviously quite hot, but the bottom of it has got some really yummy, crunchy darkness to it, which I love because of that cast iron. And you can see all of the jalapeno, the bacon in it. And what I have made to go on top is honey butter. So I had some leftover brown butter from something I had made recently, and I just dumped it into a little cup, stuck it in the fridge. I added some more just regular butter to it and then some honey. And I kind of go like, I would say 75-25, where quite a bit more butter than honey. So like half as much honey as butter, if that makes sense. And then just hit it with a hand mixer until it is all fluffy. and you get this luscious stuff. It's so good. And it's got these bits in it from the brown butter. I also added a little bit of salt because while I do all of my baking with unsalted butter, I love the flavor of salted on top of something. So I added some salt to it and the honey into the butter, and it is a delicious topping here. So I'm just going to spread that right on my cornbread. That is so good. I love it. It's very savory. That tiny bit of sugar really just kind of helps everything come together and give it a balanced flavor. It doesn't have a super sweet taste by any means. Any sweetness I'm getting out of it right now is from the honey. All right, guys. Well, I hope that you check out my book and that you bake some stuff and that you have fun with it. I would love to hear what you guys are making, or if you've already made something, let me know. Let's see, kind of early on this, but I think I've said everything I need to say. Made the cornbread. Does anybody have questions? We can do questions. Let's see. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Otherwise, I'm just going to stand here and you can watch me eat cornbread for 20 minutes. I'm going to wait just a little bit, make sure in case if anybody is typing that I don't miss anything. Thanks. Thank you, Barbara. Is there a tricked meringue? Okay, yes. I don't think let me see. I don't think I have any meringue in. Oh, I do. I do have meringue in here. So one of the desserts that I make in Cakes and Cupcakes, Chapter 4, is a baked Alaska bowl, and it's on page 74. Oh goodness, I kind of sucked in a little bit there. Excuse me. So to make a really good meringue, the ratio that I like to use is kind of seem extreme. 4 egg whites to 1 cup of sugar. And I know that seems like an awful lot of sugar, but it is going to make a really stable meringue. So just think of it that 4 to 1, 4 egg whites, 1 cup of sugar. That is step 1, is to add that much sugar because it's going to help your eggs. It's going to stabilize them. It's going to give them volume. The second thing that I recommend is adding heat to cook them just a little bit without like cooking them. My grandmother did, my mom did, put their meringue pies in the oven to set the meringue, and I don't do that. I use this. It is my kitchen torch, and I will use that to torch my meringue to give it some color, but also I will heat my egg whites and sugar. So if I'm cheating and I'm in a hurry, I will set up my stand mixer. I will turn it on, and while it is whipping the egg whites and the sugar, I will turn on my torch because I have a metal bowl, and I will just heat the outside of the bowl, just, swiping. You don't want to just sit there and hold it on the bowl. You just want to get it warmed. and that is going to help. If you don't have a torch and don't want to try my ridiculousness, what you can do is set up a double boiler. So put some water and then take your mixer bowl, put your sugar, put your egg whites, and just whisk lightly until all of that sugar is dissolved. And once the sugar is dissolved and it's incorporated into the egg whites, whip them. And that's going to give you, again, a lot of volume and a lot of stability. Like I've seen meringues that 5 minutes after you've made it, it's starting to deflate. This will last for hours, where you can continue to work with it and manipulate it for hours. And then you can put it on a pie. And if it goes into the fridge, it is good for days. So that is, those are my two things, the sugar and then that heat. And that's going to make an awesome meringue for you. All right. Anything else? No problem, Phyllis. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Not, I'm gonna eat a little bit more cornbread. Do you do any cooking classes? Yes, actually, I do. If you check out my Facebook page, which is Sweet Love Bakes, I am teaching quite a few baking classes with Pulaski Tech right now. I just taught a book Thursday, taught a class called Bake the Book. Everybody got a copy of my book and we did a couple of recipes from it. And then we talked through some tips and stuff. I have, my sugar cookie class has sold out. I had 4 classes. I'm trying to remember. Oh, yes. Okay. There's a cookie camp that is coming up. So cookie camp is going to be, I'm going to show you guys how to take a couple of basic recipes and then we can swap out some ingredients and turn this one recipe into 3 or 4. This other one's going to turn into like 1 or 2, and the other one can turn into any number based on what you add into it. And then how to store them. And basically in November, learn how to make all of your Christmas cookies so you can deliver fresh sorted cookie trays to all of your friends at Christmas, and they will be so impressed. It'll look like you've been baking for days and days. The iced sugar cookie classes for December are already sold out. I sold out 2 of those. And I've put together classes for the spring for Pulaski Tech. I'll be doing 10 different classes. I think there are 4 sugar cookie classes. Ooh, yes. There is a French macaron class that I will be teaching as well. I think there's either 1 or 2 of those. A stacked cake class that I'm teaching, and then another bake the book class. So yes, macarons. I have a class in the spring that I will be teaching macarons at Pulaski Tech through their community ed. And if you follow me, like I said, follow me on Facebook, also Instagram. It's all Sweet Love Bakes. Those are not on Zoom. They are in-person classes, but Pulaski Tech is starting to do some limited in-person. So it's 14 people total in the classroom. Everybody is masking right now still. I think it should be that way in the spring as well. I don't have any Zoom classes scheduled, but it is something I'm kind of exploring. I think there's like Patreon is a way that people can subscribe and get content from you. So that's something I'm looking into to possibly doing so that people can continue to get content like this virtually. All right. Well, if there are not any more questions, then I suppose that is it. Oh, we got one. Good show. Facebook. Facebook is Sweet Love Bakes. All one word. And yes, that is where I put all of my baking content and things like that. I used to have a bakery. It was called Sweet Love on Cantrell. And so I just continued to use all of the existing branding that I had set up. I do wedding cakes as well. And so I do share quite a bit of that on that page as well. So you'll see my wedding cakes and then you'll see recipes and stuff. My book doesn't have as many photos as I would like. So I will do some either videos or photos of recipes just so people can kind of see what the end product should be looking like. So you can find all of that there. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And like I said, follow me on Facebook, or which is now the metaverse. Follow me there. I hope to see you guys. Thanks. Bye.